Hey, you. Hey, let's focus. Come on up. Oh, yeah, wait. Hi. Welcome
Oh
to
my
These
God.
Heels. Good talk.
You started already.
Yes.
I wasn't ready.
You're ready.
I don't have any focus.
Well, we're going to have some now.
Oh, okay.
This is JoyGenea from Solutions by JoyGenea.
And this is Michelle from Bad Cat Digital with a terribly acted small skit to start your morning and your day.
It was not terribly
It was terribly acted. It was bad.
Well, haven't exactly been
It was
overly
fun.
focused. It took us 30 minutes to get started, and it was not all equipment failure. So we've wandered there and there.
Whatever.
But
it's the pre-talk. We had to warm up.
We do.
It's so early in the morning.
And
because this is the only time
yes,
that the two of us can focus and get and record if these heels could talk. So obviously we're talking about focus today. Yeah. JoyGenea sent me an 1.5-hour podcast with Brene Brown last night.
And you didn't plow through it?
And I didn't finish it, surprisingly enough.
I can understand that. Because I remember when I hit play on it, I went, well, is it still going?
But I did get into the meat of what they were talking about. So we'll link it in ours. Yes. But there's a Brene Brown talking to Dr. Amishi Jha. Is that how she said it?
Yes.
J-H-A, Jha. Mm-hmm. I will say it like that and probably butcher it awful. Who's fantastic and studies attention and the brain. Mm-hmm. As a neuroscientist or psychologist, or I don't know. I wasn't. Yeah. So the cool thing about this to me was an early concept, obviously, because I didn't listen to the whole thing, but an early concept in this was this idea that when you have X amount of bandwidth, like it's like a finite.
Focus is finite. Let's just be really clear.
And so you can shift your focus within that bandwidth, and that bandwidth includes what's happening internally as well as what's happening externally, and what you remember about something depends on what you're focused on in that moment. I thought that was mind blowing.
It is.
And absolutely, yeah. I mean, when you say it out loud, it's like, oh, well, yeah, duh. But super cool.
And in particular, for me, just to remind people, so a focus is about attention, and attention is our brain's capacity to prioritize some information over other information.
Okay. Yes.
That's what we're talking about. And so remember, I work with neurodiverse people, and so attention deficit disorder often gets brought into the conversation.
Sure.
And that's one reason I found this really interesting, because it so applies not just to them by any means, but also when you can start to talk about the brain's capacity for attention. And if there is some neuro difference in that, and how that, how not having the chemistry to create focus, or to have structured focus, or to have too much focus, which actually part of attention deficit disorder can actually be
hyperfocus. Yeah, yes. Hyperfocus.
Like the whole rest of the world goes away, and this is all you see on something. I found this really interesting, and I definitely could see how it applied.
Well, and one of the most interesting things that brings up for me is this concept that when those of us who are neurotypical experience behaviors of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as a memory problem. You didn't remember to get to the appointment on time. You didn't remember to do this thing. You didn't remember to do that thing. You didn't pick up the thing. You put this thing down over here and didn't remember to come back for it. We experience it as a memory problem.
Oh.
We experience the behavior as a problem with that person's memory. And so we offer such helpful tips as, why don't you write it down? And you should get a planner.
Oh, yes.
Such helpful tips.
Well,
they're not helpful. No, they're shaming and not helpful at all.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The point being this, though, this focus on focus.
Yes.
Would say that it's not a memory problem. It's a focus problem. Because it's not that person didn't remember that they put the thing down and moved over there. It's that they didn't focus on it, and therefore it didn't get turned into long-term memory, and therefore they don't remember.
Yes.
So it's not a problem of somebody's memory that they made an appointment with you a month ago and didn't show up, or showed up an hour late, or 2 hours late, or didn't show up at all. It's a problem of their attention and focus when they made the appointment wasn't entirely on you. And therefore, it didn't get transferred into their long-term storage or long-term memory.
Yes.
It's really interesting. It's an interesting concept.
Oh, the whole thing, it gets better it just keeps building.
Yeah, it
It's
just
like,
keeps building.
She has a whole, so if you've ever over-listened to Brené Brown, which I have because I'm taking the Dare to Lead thing, so I feel like I'm getting to know that
you're really
person.
in there.
I'm in there.
And it's not my favorite
and
rhetoric.
She definitely has, I would say, if I were to, pin a few things, Brené Brown definitely has some distractible attention.
Yeah.
Not to apply label, but she definitely does.
Yeah.
And shows some of that neurology. And so she was trying to justify multitasking.
Sure.
I don't know if you heard that section, but
Sure. Well, I do the same thing when I'm in therapy. I try to justify multitasking.
Right.
And my therapist is like, mindfulness is about doing one thing at a time. What is something that you do where you only do one thing at a time? And I literally can't answer the question.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing that I do where I only do one thing at a time. I mean, even as simple as this, I've got a drink in front of me.
Right.
We're doing this.
We're also kind of reading this stuff.
We're reading this thing. My phone's here. I've got a drink in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about when I could take a pause and take the next sip. So am I really giving you and this conversation my undivided attention? No, I'm not.
And maybe as business owners, part of our neurology is it's not maybe our strength to be super focused on one particular thing. But instead of one, she said you cannot multitask, actually. She was just kind of clear. They've done more than enough studying. It's not multitasking. You can task switch.
Quickly.
But the point being just what you were talking about.
Yeah.
That is also switching focus, which is also switching on your memory and the ability to retain it. So when you are task switching, I did it the other day. It was hilarious. I was literally doing 4 things. I had 3 computers going on my desk. I was doing 4, and I had
That's too many.
And I had somebody
for me.
I had somebody logged in and actually remotely working on one computer, and I was writing emails and something else. I was doing some QuickBooks stuff here. So I was between them all. And what was great was when I was done, and they were meaningless tasks I did not need to retain. And I was checking the list, but I did something fun. About 10 minutes after I'd gotten done and had focused on something that was happening over on the managed computer, and I had flipped that sheet of paper over, I looked at the blank sheet of paper and I went to myself, I'm like, what's on the other side of that sheet of paper? What did you accomplish? I could remember not one task.
Right.
I remembered the QuickBooks finally. I was like, okay. I did the QuickBooks thing. Okay. I couldn't remember any of the rest. And that I thought, wow, because it was such an extreme moment. I went, what a really good way of demonstrating task switching and the inability for your brain to have any of it.
Well, and the metaphor that Brené Brown and Dr. Amishi used, I'm going to say that because it's the closest thing I could.
Yeah.
The metaphor that they used was that feeling when you're kind of driving and you're thinking about something deeply, or maybe listening to music, or heaven forbid, being on your phone, totally illegal in Minnesota. But people do it anyway. I see it all the time. And so here's the thing: when you are doing those 2 things together, where is your focus? Where is your attention? It's not on the road.
No.
And that experience that you have of driving to work and forgetting, like all of a sudden you're at work and you have no idea how you got there. That means that you were more focused internally on whatever you were thinking about than you were on the drive. And remember that finite bandwidth, you were giving the largest portion of it to the thought processes and the thinking, and almost none to the driving. Now, what's cool about this concept of focus is that there's also other areas of the brain that do alert and executive control. So if there was an emergency situation, your brain very quickly flips from what it's doing to what it should be doing.
Hopefully in fast enough time.
But that's exactly, fast enough time for it to be suddenly raining really hard, or you to hear a siren behind you and now all of a sudden you're on alert looking for this.
Or all of a sudden you see that accident up, all of a sudden you see the brake lights, all of a sudden you're cruising along at 65, 70 miles an hour on the interstate,
and you see some brake lights.
You start to see some brake lights, and it's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And all of a sudden you need to be stopping.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. I reached for the radio.
Pulls me right back.
All of a sudden
and you turn down the radio.
I turned down the radio.
Turn down the radio.
And she talked about that. She's like, that is you getting really present and wanting to have all of your attention.
Well, and we were just on a road trip in Texas like a month ago.
Yeah.
And I'm driving in cities that I don't know, trying to get to a place and follow instructions from the GPS voice talking to me. And my lovely and wonderful, beautiful, amazing husband
Yes.
has very interesting things that he wants to tell me about, like how light bulbs work, or about, a particular moth that is outside of the car and how it's right.
Yeah.
And so we are maybe 2 miles away, right at the point when you really have to pay attention to what you're doing in order to navigate to the destination.
Yep.
Like it's like a bunch of turns at the end and you're trying to pay attention to all of this new stuff outside. And that's when he decides to tell me about, I don't know, the mating habits of the Luna moth. And but here's the thing.
Not kidding.
I'm not kidding. And I don't remember what he was trying to tell me. And it takes everything I have. Not to say, we're going to have to take that out. Are you freaking kidding me? Because it's just like overload at that moment. And you're like, really? Mm-hmm. This is the moment that you should choose. But here's the thing. Yeah. He's on that spectrum of attention deficit disorder of ADHD. Mm-hmm. Absolutely is. He's old enough that he wasn't formally diagnosed when he was a kid, but he totally is. And he knows it.
Yes.
And if I interrupt him in that moment, it's gone and he'll be sad.
I know. I know exactly.
He gets sad because it disappears and he really wants to share it with me. At the same time, I can't retain it in that state.
Oh, not at all. Because you've now officially tuned him out. You had to choose. Yeah. You had to turn on the executive focus and be like, I'm all about this GPS.
Yeah.
You're not here.
Yeah. You're not here. This isn't here. This is all I can have right now.
Yes, I totally get that. There was you brought up another thing that I thought was really a good example.
Yes.
About focus.
Oh, yeah. So I was teaching my nephew how to drive. And he is 19 now and has very high anxiety about driving. Right. In general, he has very high anxiety.
And if you don't know this, anxiety reduces your ability to focus.
Right. And remember what we said, bandwidth is finite and it's what's happening externally and what's happening internally. So anxiety is like this drumbeat, this voice. It's telling you whatever it's telling you, you're not good enough or you're going to fail or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. In his flavor of anxiety, it's very much about failure and the fear of making a mistake and the fear of doing something wrong and the fear of somebody yelling at him for doing something wrong. And so it's really important that that when we went out driving is all about decisions and he can't make decisions in real time. He gets really anxious about it. So one of the things, it's a stress, it's a threat.
Yes. If that's the conversation in his head, he is actually self-imposing stress, threat, and negative thought.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So you're right.
And he doesn't have coping mechanisms. Yeah. And he doesn't have coping mechanisms to re-regulate himself yet. We're working on it.
I know. I know he's working on it.
Meanwhile, he still needs to learn how to drive because we can't be driving him around forever. And he wants to. It's a huge achievement for him. Yes. And now that he has his driver's license, he's so proud of himself. I'm so proud of him. But when we were out teaching him to drive, I was not telling him where to go, in part because there was no reason to. We had no destination in mind. And in part because this is an essential part of the skill of driving that he needs to practice, making a decision in real time, learning how to make a decision a block away about what you're going to do at that stoplight that you see so that you can be in the right lane, you can do the right thing, and you can move when the stoplight turns green quickly, right? And get out of the way. Because that's the thing. He was driving too slow. He wasn't a teenage boy. Cautious. He was being overly cautious. He failed his first driving test for going 10 miles an hour in a residential. Overly cautious. He drives like he's driving in a parking lot all the time. And it's very overwhelming for him. Yeah. But what was happening internally for him was pulling so much focus that he couldn't focus on external circumstances. And this is the first scenario situation where he has to learn how to break out of, how to quiet, how to refocus or put his full attention on the external circumstances and quiet the internal voice so that he can focus on the external circumstances. And with practice, he was able to get there. And now he's got this cutest little like apple green car. He got
Does
this cute
he?
green car.
Aw.
It's adorable.
That's
That he
so-
bought from some sketchy mechanic in, in
matter. It
Monticello.
runs.
It doesn't matter.
It runs.
And it's really exciting for him. So, but that's the point. Teaching him how to drive wasn't so much teaching him the mechanics of driving. He had that down.
Yeah.
It was teaching him how to make decisions in real time and teaching him how to switch his focus to external circumstance very quickly.
Yeah. All that, which are all important things, all necessary. In life.
Absolutely.
Like, these are all great things. She talked in there, they were talking about how focus is like a flashlight. She gave that analogy. And I thought that was really good. So in a dark room, you can tune out the whole rest of the room. If your flashlight,
if you're
beam
super
is this
focused
small and it's over in that corner, like,
well, and
you
that's
can
why
do
they
that.
call it laser focus. It's just a tighter beam of light.
And then if you've got a really broad flash, you turn on the light, the whole room's illuminated. Now we're taking in the whole room, but retaining far less of it.
Right.
And that is part of also why eyewitnesses are not always the best things.
Right.
Right. Because where was their focus? A lot of times if somebody pulls out a weapon, they'll describe the weapon in detail.
But not the person's face
Right,
who was holding it.
because they moved into that alert system and they went shoop, flashlight,
Danger.
danger.
That is the danger.
Like, look at that. There was another, and I liked this about the flashlight approach. As I think these moments happen a lot as a parent. I don't see them as much,
Sure.
but I see them with employees. I do experience them with employees, but I have this great story. I was on an airplane and a woman just recently, and I had specifically chosen the aisle seats. And 3 out of 4 flights, people asked if I would give up my aisle seat for them. I just must look like that person. Anyways, and so I am on the last.
The audacity.
I'm on the last one. And so this woman is sitting in my seat and I'm like, well, and she explains that her children are actually sitting across
the aisle.
And I completely understood why she wanted to do that. I couldn't find the words. I just stared at her until she moved. Like I couldn't even say no. I just stared at her. So now she is sitting to my right and I have her children to my left.
Okay.
And she is not a happy person.
No, she's upset.
And I've started to notice once the plane takes off and stuff that she actually has really, really high anxiety about flying. Like she's gripping that seat for life. Like she's over
which
there
then of course would make her fear for her children as well.
Absolutely. So I got where I was sitting in between and so forth. So we were up in the plane. The kids are having a lovely time, and they were older. These were not super young kids. They were older. So, anyways, we're up, down, and when we land, I have to say it was one of the hardest landings I ever experienced. We double bounced. Like we went down and did a couple of those. So she's over there gripping it for life. And I've got the 2 kids sitting across from me and they're trying to decide how they feel.
Right.
There was this moment, I felt it. There was this moment and I did lifeguard training and I knew exactly, like I just knew it. I knew that look and I just burst out laughing. Yeah. In that moment I went, we're going to take the flashlight and we're going to laugh.
Yeah.
And they looked at me and they just bust out and we laughed. And I'm like, wasn't that like a roller coaster? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, it was kind of fun. And the mom is hyperventilating next to me. And I'm like blocking her view so that these young ladies could choose in that moment where their focus was. But I knew that if she had been able to express where she was at, they would have decided that that was scary and bad.
Right,
and,
because mom leads the way, right?
Right,
like,
and she's not wrong exactly, but in that moment, all I could think of is let's release as many endorphins and all of that fear and anxiety and all of that stuff that came up, because I needed to get it out too. I was like, oh, let's just get all this out. But I could just feel that flashlight. I'm like, I am focusing it right over here and let's see if I can take them with me. And they totally embraced it.
They totally embraced
cute.
it. That's super fun. What did she do when you started laughing? She
shot them a nasty look. After she could get a look at them, she shot them a look like, do not laugh with that woman. And they looked at me and I just winked at them and they're like, oh, and they sat back, but they still had that little.
Because she was so mad at you.
Right.
Yeah.
So they couldn't be happy with me. And she had no idea what I had, like.
Yeah, she had no idea.
Because she was so scared. Like
and she probably thought you were laughing at her.
Probably.
Yeah.
And her hyper focus was on her fear and anxiety.
Yeah, because her hyper focus was on herself.
Which I get.
Like, which I totally understand.
Right. But Absolutely. It was a really interesting, I thought it was a great example of that focus.
I think about when toddlers have tantrums, or my favorite, like when a toddler bumps into something and they're not really hurt, like they fall or they bump their head or they're not really hurt. There's that moment. It's very short. It's a very short window of opportunity. You have to redirect their focus to something else, something fun, something funny, something completely different, something over there, something interesting. Look at that tree, or doesn't that cloud look like an elephant, and which one, right? And all of a sudden they forget that they're supposed to be hurt. They forget that they're supposed to be, because the bump maybe surprised them more than it hurt them. And so there's this tiny little moment. And in that tiny little moment, if you react with, oh my God, are you okay? That's when they start to really dysregulate. And so that little tiny moment you have, but the thing is that I do that to myself.
We do that to ourselves.
I have those little tiny moments as well. Like I have this window when I'm frustrated and upset. This is why we count to 5 before we answer something. This is why we redirect ourselves, or when somebody walks in and says, you got a minute, and you're deep in something else, it's good to say, it's not bad. It's good to say, I need 2 minutes to finish this thought. If you'd like to stay, that's fine. Or you can come back, whichever. But I need 2 minutes to finish this thought, because if you just say, yeah, go, but you're still focused on this thought, you are not giving that person, you're not switching your focus. You're not giving that person your other focus. And so, and that's where I experience it as rude. And I feel rude when I do it to other people. If I'm out to eat and they're constantly looking at their phone, or, like that kind of divided attention is, I experienced that as rude. And when I was a kid, I remember my mom was amazing at getting into a flow and getting into a workflow. And she got a master's degree when I was like 8 or 10 or something. Yeah. And, she was working full time. She had 2 small kids, and she was getting her master's degree. Wow. And she did it at the kitchen table.
Cool. So she was this great example.
So she was a great example. Yes. And I remember feeling really dismissed and rebuffed when we couldn't get her attention. Because she was knee deep in her books. She was so focused on what it was that we were like, Mom, hey, Mom, hey, Mom, Mom, hey, Mom. And it wasn't that annoying mom thing when they're looking at you going, what? Right. It was the really trying to get her attention. Yeah. And now that people do that to me, I'm like, oh, that was really annoying. but you're a kid. You don't know, anyway.
Well, and this goes into our staff. And, yes. And so there's part of the focus
and leadership
conversation is our leadership. So we've been kind of talking about that, but also recognizing and noticing within your staff when they're attempting to do way too much task switching.
Right.
When they're understanding focus a little more in depth.
Yeah.
It helps you to point out to them, here's what's kind of happening, and let's try this.
And the thing that suddenly occurs to me is that yes, while bandwidth is finite, it would also be different for different people.
Exactly.
So different people are going to need more time to switch focus.
Yes.
Different people are going to need different tools to switch focus. When I am here at work, physically in the building, I am at work. Mm-hmm. I don't deal with, and every once in a while I have to like make a doctor's appointment or something, but I don't deal with that stuff at work. I'm at work.
Yep.
And when something happens, it's extraordinary. It's not normal.
Yep.
But when I'm home, I resent every minute that I think about work, that I spend on work, because I'm physically in my other space.
You have worked to clarify that boundary.
And I have worked really hard on that because I needed to.
Right.
I absolutely needed to.
And I think a lot of business owners, once they actually get down to the core of who they are, they need to also do something similar to
this
that.
Is
Not
why
all, but a majority.
It's why during the pandemic it was so hard for me to work from home.
Yeah.
I mean, I came back to the office myself.
Early on.
Early, because nobody else was there. Like so what's the difference?
I think it was like a month and a half in or so.
Yeah, it wasn't that. I didn't. I came back to the office during lockdown because nobody else was there. So what was the difference?
Yeah. So something we should add in there. I did make it to the end of the podcast, and this is the interesting part.
Oh, so I'm really going to listen to the rest.
So, Doctor,
probably while I'm answering email today. This is multitasking.
This is what's great. Is she is Indian.
Yes.
And she talks about that. And the fact that being Indian and so forth and growing up in the environment she did, like meditation was rather like other things kind of pushed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And very associated with the Indian culture. And
it'd be kind of like prayer for me. Like it gets really pushed on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after all of her research, and she's doing all these things, how do you improve your focus?
Meditation.
It is meditation. And you can just tell as she talks about it, she resisted as long as humanly. Like
resented and resisted.
She was just like, no.
It's got to be something else.
And what they found is 12 minutes a day. Like if you really wanted to get down to it, building yourself up to 12 minutes a day. And she talks about a lot of people have a belief that meditation looks only one way.
Right.
I want to tell you,
it doesn't.
Google the heck out of it. That's not true.
It's not true.
One thing they even brought up, you grab a sheet of paper and a pen and doodle. That just makes girls lay on the ground and stare at the clouds and guess what they look like.
Yeah.
That all qualifies as meditation.
But here's the thing. You don't listen to a podcast at the same time.
Right. That's just it. No.
You don't do anything else at the same time. And
Correct.
That's what my therapist was trying to say to me.
Yes.
You need to do this. Like driving can be a meditation
if
it's the only thing that you do.
Yes.
There's mindfulness exercises in different branches of Buddhism for doing the dishes. Mm-hmm. And mindfulness exercises for making a salad and mindfulness, so these
for
tasks.
Doesn't know mindfulness because I've been learning about it in the last year or so. It's like, I'll use the dishes as an example. You feel, what is the temperature of the water?
Yeah. What does the soap feel like between your fingers?
Feel like? Like looking at
what do the bubbles smell like?
Yeah. It's getting into all of your senses.
Yes.
Be present
the details
with all of
them.
your senses. Oh, this little thing is really, like this chunk of thing. Listen to my fingernail, like on that plate. Like, that's that when they're talking about mindfulness, that's what it is. It's utilizing all 5 of your senses to really be present. To
be super present in the moment with what you're doing. And not letting your mind wander and thinking about other things which
really is bringing that flashlight,
that focus.
Yes, into just this one thing, which allows, and what they found is by doing this, even if it's small increments throughout the day, really just allows your brain to reset. It gives it this opportunity to reset and thereby giving you more opportunity for more flexibility, more bandwidth.
I think we could probably think about it like eye fatigue. Because the metaphor is all about light here, right?
Yes.
A lit room versus a dark room with a flashlight.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on high alert and the whole room's lit up super bright so you can see everything all at once because you don't know what's going on, that's exhausting to do for a very long space of time.
Absolutely.
And if the room is dark and you can point the flashlight at only the thing you need to point the flashlight at, but the point of meditation and mindfulness is being able to control the flashlight. And so that's what I have therapy tonight. And that's probably what we'll talk about because I've gotten to the point now where I can't even take a shower without having something else on.
Ooh.
like a book on tape or a podcast. I can't even. And so like it's really gotten to the point where I'm always constantly trying to distract myself into focus.
Yeah.
I'm trying to distract myself into rest, and you can't distract yourself into rest. It's like constantly
it's just always been
it's like input in a baby and then expecting the baby to fall asleep. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. No. So thank you for focusing with us today.
Yes.
On focus. And
focus.
I have no doubt that you've taken away some beautiful nuggets. We're going to have links to the podcast. We'll have links to my blog that I wrote about it. That's got a nice infographic if you would like it.
And Dr. Amishi Jaz, I'm probably mispronouncing that severely, but she also wrote a book about this. So we'll link to that as well.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to bringing you new and interesting things to focus on next